Warm greetings. Welcome to Wednesdays for Water. We are a citizens collective aiming to walk and talk water. We try to meet every week and connect people with various water worries and wisdoms. And in the process, we wish to curate future water warriors. The way we talk about trivial things for hours, water too needs walking and talking to address the rising water distresses. The way Wednesdays for Water is conceptualized as a prime time show, it wishes to make water everybody's business. The idea of the series was conceptualized in August 2020, and by the end of the year, the team and the structure was pretty much in shape. We started in April 2021 with Dr. Rajendra Singh Ji's inaugural speech. We wish to bring science and society together, and therefore we try to bring in every session either a policymaker or practitioner and a researcher or academician. We also think that future generation is crucial and therefore they have presence in each session. We are going stronger with every week now with session on either quiz, couple of weeks of hard talks and a week of soft session of art and music. There is a simple structure for each session of quiz, hard session and soft session which are moderated by the core team member. Here is a glimpse of what we call as hard sessions and soft sessions. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to one more session of Wednesdays for Water. And today we are discussing legal battles for water. And in this, we would like to talk about what kind of cries water bodies, water systems, water distributions, water as a being, water resource for that matter, are really fought in the court, discussed, judgments come on them, and what kind of winning and losing battles water systems fight with us, and how experts, how activists, how citizens become the voice of this voiceless being. So personally, from my end, I see water bodies as being, but then water is not limited to water resource per se. We have to talk about all kinds of water resource, right from gray, black, and pure water, from glaciers to climate change, to river, to ponds, to lakes, to groundwater even. So today we actually want to take a beautiful journey, which is in a way beautiful to talk about, but there is a lot of cry for water. But important is that we touch upon the various scales of water battles which are fought in the court. Importantly, how our courts or our judiciaries are ready or not ready to some extent to fight these battles for water, and how our experts fight it for the water systems. So today we have three presenters as our usual Wednesdays for Water goes. We have with us Manshi Asher. We have Rohit Prajapati sir and Shrirajsinh Gohil. And I'm going to quickly take you through a brief bio of the three people before we start the conversation. So Manshi is an environmental activist, particularly looking at what kind of water systems, land systems, forest right issues, and alliances related to people really go around water systems as well as environmental systems. She has worked extensively in many states, including Uttarakhand, Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, and also Gujarat. She is running her own collective called Himdhara, and in that she actually lends support and solidarity to community movements to protect their livelihoods and landscapes. So welcome Manshi on this platform of Wednesdays for Water. And I also welcome with you all the participants who have been joining us here in Wednesdays for Water for last 8 months. Then we have Rohit Prajapati sir. I know him for a long time, but it is now in the recent time I had a chance to really talk to him as one-to-one, So Rohit sir is a very well-known activist, researcher, writer here in our very own Gujarat. He can be really called as our Senapati, if I must say, in environmental legal battles. We were just discussing before this session that he is engineer by training, but he's actually more activist by heart, and he touches upon various aspects of water, right from water pollution, occupational health, and then goes up to organic farming. And he also works with people, with the trade unions, and also indigenous people, to defend the civil rights. And also he's well known for his work in peace and justice. So these few words, and then we have my dear student, Shrirajsinh Gohil. He is a conservation architect and social activist. And I'm also going to share with all of you why these three people are here and why we are going to discuss this today. So Shriraj is actually working on an array of conservation and hospitality projects. And I know him very well, is particularly being my student, but more so he's here today because he has fought for some lakes and ponds in his region of Kutch and Bhuj. So with this short bio and brief, I'm going to actually open up the session with my questions, which I usually do in Wednesdays for Water. And because we are going to touch today from climate change to the smallest unit of water bodies as we see lakes and ponds, we have really a long way to go in today's discussion. So welcome once again to all of you and to all the speakers. Thank you for giving us time and agreeing to have this wonderful conversation to be in progress now. As a usual routine thing, I will start with a question, and I will request all the three speakers to speak for around 10 to 12 minutes and give their pitch or position on the matter of legal battles for water. And then our discussant today, Shri Raj, is going to take it up for the conversation between three of you. So my questions are always like a naive child who is the first time working in this field. And because Manshiji, I know you work right from climate change to the people, my question is our judiciary really ready to address a situation like climate change, where we are already struggling to take up day-to-day activities in the battlefields of judiciary? How far and how much our judiciary is now prepared to really even take up cases on climate change? And then when we look at issues like transboundary, which is also your area when you work in the river basin, um, and we know that a lot of dams and rivers have been fought in the courts. But do you think we need some extra, teething or some kind of extra working to make our judiciary be more prepared to take up climate justices or injustices in the court matters, both from the lawyer's side as well as activist side and also judges side? Because we see some interesting landmark judgments coming up now from the judges. So with these small but I know very complicated questions, I open the floor to Manshi, and Mansi calling Manshi. Over to you, Manshi. Welcome again.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mansee, for inviting me for this session. And I really look forward to listening to everybody who is here and also discussing this topic. Let me just jump straight in. Now, I'm going to try and address your question. But before I come to that, I need to provide a brief context of where I'm coming from and in terms of the geography also. But also in terms of the way philosophically and ideologically we look at the issues of climate justice. And I think that to separate climate justice from larger environmental justice and from justice per se is very difficult. So it all is kind of very closely interlinked, and so I'm going to try and bring about those interlinkages. But let me first talk about water in the Himalayas. So if you look at the Himalaya, which are the youngest mountain range in the world, are also referred to as water towers of this country. They are referred to as the third pole, and that is because it is the largest storehouse of water in the world apart from the two poles, as in it's the third largest, so it's referred to as the third pole. It stores water in the form of snow and then gradually releases it in the form of rivers, which is like the river systems of the Himalayas cover an area of 2.75 million square kilometers. So that is pretty large. And when we talk about the river systems and the major river systems of the Indian Himalaya, so to speak, we are looking at the Brahmaputra, Ganga, and the Indus River basins. And where I am based in Himachal, this is part of the Indus River system. And like you said, the Brahmaputra and Indus are both transboundary rivers, also part of the Ganga, where we are sharing, our transboundary rights with Nepal, with the Mahakali, etc. So these are also transboundary rivers as far as the Himalayas are concerned, and even lower down. Now, the river systems are important not only, as ecological systems, because they're like the lifelines. They carve out the valleys and they're carving out the mountains. They're carrying down the the water, as well as sediment, which kind of not just caters to the livelihood needs of the people who live in the Himalayan region, but also the people who live in the plains, in the Indo-Gangetic plains, in the Punjab plains, in the Brahmaputra plains. So the sediment forms the kind of the fertile soil of these regions and caters to the food security of millions of people. So almost 1.5 billion is the number of people who are dependent on these river systems and on the mountains. And we cannot separate forests from rivers, of course, because forests are like hold the soil of the Himalaya together. So now, if we have to kind of understand the ecological and the current crisis facing the Himalayan region, we need to remember that this is a region that is not just biodiverse and has this kind of very rich cultural, social, ecological contribution that it's making. It's also a region that is extremely fragile. It is fragile because there is a certain geological and tectonic kind of dynamic nature of the landscape. It's fragile also because the kind of biodiversity that you find in this region and the kind of formations that you find in the region and the kind of even the kind of livelihoods that are practiced, if there's a disturbance in the landscape, the impact is very visible and the impact is very intense. So it is fragile in that sense. It is also now, in the current scenario, fragile because of the climatic crisis and the global warming that is happening across the world. But it is one of the regions which is more vulnerable because even a slight change in the temperature means that there is a great depletion in the snow cover and in the precipitation in the area. Now, if I just take an example, just in last 2 years, there's been an 18% decrease in the snow cover in Himachal itself. And deglaciation, if you've heard about that our glaciers are retreating back. So whether it's the Ganga or other glaciers, these are retreating back. And if the glaciers are retreating and the snow cover area is reducing, that means that there is going to be a impact on the discharge of these rivers and the water is going to decrease. So there is not just a big crisis that is on the annual, you can already see it is impacting the livelihoods. The other thing that is going to happen or is already happening with this climate crisis is the increasing climate disasters that you see. So if you've heard of what all has been happening in Uttarakhand or Himachal in the last, during the monsoons, this is something that over the last decade or so has become very frequent. The climate disasters, whether it is glacial bursts, whether it is flash floods, landslides, and these claiming lives, these disrupting the livelihoods, etc. that has become very common because of the climatic changes. But it's not fair to put this entire thing only on climate change and on the existing fragility or the inherent fragility of the region. It's a combination. The third important part of this entire thing is the kind of development model that is being followed in this country, and especially in the Himalayan region. You see that there is mindless infrastructure development that is going on, especially a very large scale activity of dam building and highway construction that is happening across the Himalaya. But you in Uttarakhand, you have the Char Dham road, for example, or in Himachal, you have the 4-lane highways. But I want to focus on the hydropower generation that is happening across the Himalaya, that the government is planning, has been doing since the 1990s. And actually, these many of the dams are really old, like the Bhakra Nangal dam that we learn about in school. That is the building started in 1950s, after independence. But the older dams, which were reservoir based dams, which were large storage dams, the new dams are slightly different from the older dams. And now what they're building is also called the run of the river projects. And these projects, what they're essentially doing is destabilizing the landscape, because what they do is they stop the river, they divert the river into tunnels which are built inside the mountains, and then they drop the water back onto the riverbed. They build a underground powerhouse and generate power over there, and then they are building another project after that. So a cascade of projects are being built one after the other, completely destroying the flow of the river. But apart from that, they are destabilizing and eroding the landscape, because it involves a lot of quarrying under the mountain, and it also involves surface level construction, which destabilizes the slopes, which causes a lot of deforestation, and therefore a lot of landslides. If you look at what has happened in 2013 in Kedarnath, or if you look at the recent Tapovan tragedy, these projects have not only been impacted as a result of a sudden so-called climatic disaster like a cloudburst or an avalanche or a landslide, but the impacts of these landslides and these climatic disasters have multiplied many-fold because of these dams, because they have caused a lot of erosion along the riverbed, and all the muck and all the silt that is eroded along the banks is all carried with the flow of the river when it's in flood, and then that kind of leads to further destruction below. And so there has been a lot of, if you see across the Himalaya, whether it is Sikkim, whether it is Arunachal, whether it is Uttarakhand, whether it is Himachal, there's a lot of opposition to these large-scale hydropower projects that are being built across the Himalayas. Almost 118,000 megawatt worth of projects are going to be built, and of these, Himachal has so far developed the largest capacity, 10,900 megawatts, almost 800 megawatts has already been built, and they're going to take it double this now. Now the thing is, if you look at and apart from this, there is a lot of other things going on, like the mindless infrastructure and tourism activity, or the industrial pollution in the lower areas, or if you look at even climate change impacting the groundwater springs in many of the areas. Even the groundwater springs are drying up. So there's already, and this is again connected with the land use change and deforestation that is happening in the region. Now what there's a need to understand is that if we want to address the issues of climate change, or we want to address environmental issues, the kind of solutions that the government is coming up with, the policy solutions are, number one, inadequate, but they're also misplaced. In fact, many of the solutions are actually causing the problem. So hydropower, for instance, is seen as renewable energy and is being promoted in the name of clean energy in the Himalaya. And it is these projects which have caused are causing more climatic changes locally. And the problem with the climate change understanding in our minds is that we always look at the carbon emission. We look at the carbon footprint. We don't look at the material footprint. We don't look at how there's an ecological footprint of a particular development activity in an area. So a hydropower project may compare to maybe a coal thermal power plant have a lesser carbon emission, but of course the reservoirs made by dams have methane emissions which are problematic, but they may have lesser carbon emission. But if you look at the whole kind of land use change that it causes in a particular area and the socio-economic and environmental impacts in a particular region, then the ecological footprint is very high. So there's a need to look at things differently. But now if we come to the solutions and the way, when the courts are approached, what is the response? Number one, I think that there is a tendency. I mean, how much time do I have left?
You may wind up as soon as possible, but
okay,
yes,
fine.
we
So
would like to
let
hear.
Me comment on the judicial thing, because I personally am of the opinion that judicial activism or judicial relying on the judiciary is slightly overrated. There is because there are a lot of limitations there. Number one, we have a limitation in terms of what Shrirajsinh just said, that there is this we have to wait for the right bench. And when you have people in the judiciary who have an elite bias, they have a certain notion of development, where sustainable development is a principle that the judiciary is constantly relying on, and then it uses national interest as an argument to as a kind of a principle that it relies on. Then it becomes an issue, because then it's not looking at local impacts. So that is one. And then it's not looking at, of course, the cumulative impact. So if you look at the Supreme Court case on the Ganga dams, and the fact that the Ministry of Environment set up on the what do you say, recommendation of the Ministry of Environment, a committee was set up, the Ravi Chopra committee, which gave recommendations that dams on the Ganga need to be stopped because of the 2013 disasters and the role that these played. Now the Ministry of Environment has gone back on its own recommendation, and on the recommendations of the Ravi Chopra committee have not been taken seriously by the Supreme Court. And now there's a push for 7 dams to be cleared on these. So what I'm trying to say is that there's also political interference as far as with judiciary is concerned. And then there's also some fundamental structural inadequacies. And the fourth thing is that the enforcement agencies or the institutional structures that are required to implement, if the judiciary does give a positive decision, which has happened in the case of Himachal, in case of one of the hydropower projects, where the NGT gave a very good judgment in 2016. But if the implementation agencies and the state agencies are not working to implement the law, it does not matter if you get a good judgment. So there are a lot of challenges at various levels. The lack of a political will and the larger political environment is such that the priority is profit. It is not really the environment or climatic changes or the communities that are impacted because of a tampering with the ecology and the landscapes that they live in. And as long as this doesn't change, I don't think that we can isolate any one particular instrument of the state and say that this can work well. But of course there are some small victories that we do celebrate, and we say, okay, fine, this is a step ahead, and we cannot stop fighting the battles. But I think that there's a need to do a critical holistic analysis of what are the problems at different levels, and then kind of approach the issue from there. So I'll stop here and perhaps then listen to what the others have to say, and more things may come to my mind later in the second round.
Thank you, Manshi. You raised some pertinent points, right from telling us that the ecology is important and it cannot be always fought for the national interest. And it always intrigues me, isn't environment itself a national interest, or is economy only the national interest, you know? So I have picked some things from your point, and also I want to tell all our participants here, today is our legal battles for water part 1, and in the part 2, which will happen sometime in February, because our January sessions are all full, we are trying to get Ravi Chopra ji on board to talk in the second part of it. So I'm very much after him. So we hope that we will get him on board to talk about it, because the panel report was extremely important for the future direction of how water systems are to be seen in the country. And he himself talks about it now in many platforms. I have heard him. So thank you, Manshi. And I will take you all from the Ganges to the Himalayas to the Indus. Now we come to Gujarat, and also we come to a very dynamic person, Rohit sir. And typically, I will again ask a very naive question to you, because I know you fight from the ground. So a very grounded question from my end, because few days ago, Gujarat High Court also gave some interesting judgments, and we exchanged those notes between each other to learn those judgments. And very interestingly, about wastewater, about water systems, leave the water bodies aside, do not tamper with them, talking about the CETP plants, and also, you know, putting local authorities accountable even for the groundwater extraction and all. So I just want to know a very, very, very simple question, because this Wednesdays for Water is more for the youth. Are we actually training our judges, our lawyers towards doing environmental activism, or judiciary, you know, for that matter? Because the moment anyone is talking about the environment, the whole action becomes activism. Even the lawyers who fight for the environment, they become activists more, and they're tagged activists more than the lawyers themselves. But are we actually looking at these water systems more holistically than it is still, as Manshi was mentioning, that everything goes in the guise of development or national interest, and environment takes the back seat? Even judges and lawyers are also playing that card. Over to you, Rohitji. You may escape or dump my questions, but I mean, I know you are also going to take up these matters on the ground, and also you are going to enlighten us today. Rohitji, over to you.
Yeah, to be very honest, I'll address your question first. It's a very crucial questions, and the answer will be depressing. I'll be very sorry that things are not in good shape. If you read judgments and read news report, you feel like that great things are happening. But when you come on the ground, when you come back to the village and the area, the scenario is frustrating, unfortunately. Let me begin 4 major points to put on record. What are the major problems? And I will link it to the judiciary and law both. The first part which Manshi made a point about hydrological project, like big dams. I know I started my life with the Narmada Bachao Andolan, Narmada, then Vishwamitri, and then Sabarmati, and then Damanganga, and then other rivers. Try to understand many issues in a very different way. The first thing which I want to put on record in front of people, that what are the things which are not there, and some of the questions I'm asking myself also. So I don't think that judiciary looked at or government looks at as if that these are the questions for them. I sometimes feel that I should also give legal notice to me and asking questions to me also, that what you talk is also problematic and you don't answer those questions, you don't address those questions. So let me put the perspective of the river and water. And I can post later on my poems. Well, I'm not a water body, I'm a live being. That's a long poem in which I try to summarize the Vishwamitri petition into the poem form, which even I read during the hearing of the petition. So first, I'm really worried with the water issue in the sense of there are 3 major issues. One is that there is a mining of water going on, and there is no auction of the water. We do have auction of the coal, but I don't know whether we have an auction of the water mining, which many industries are doing in many ways, like using for an industrial purpose, that is one thing, but also selling the water. And still I'm unable to find out the law under which they're allowed to sell the water. And I think we need to ask that questions, commodification of the water. And another crucial aspect is the water balance sheet. I always talk since many years that the way we have a budget, which state assembly and the corporation and the parliament present, I think if everybody talks that the third world war will be water, then why we are not talking about water balance sheet? And who is going to talk about those data? So there is no data generation. We have no idea how much water, where it is located in lakes, ponds, groundwater, dams, or flowing water. We have no data, and there is no documentation. And that's why we have no idea who is using or who is misusing that water. And the whole issue of water mining in huge quantity has been completely ignored. And whenever these questions are raised in the court unable to understand, to be really honest. And many times people like us are simplifying it, and even then it doesn't go through up till now. That's one issue. When you look at the Water Act and EPA Act 1986, 74 Water Act, you don't find one of the crucial things, which is that when we talk about pollution in terms of lake, pond, wetland, river, groundwater, you don't find any clear-cut understanding that if somebody is contaminating that water, which ultimately create problem for the people who are using it for agriculture purpose, drinking purpose, and we completely ignore the birds and animals, other live beings. We looked at us is the only live being on the earth, and we ignore them, and we don't find those provisions even in the law. When we argue the matter that the people whose groundwater is contaminated, how you're going to compensate, and that doesn't come in. And people like me has argued very vehemently and aggressively in the court, and unable to explain to the judiciary, also unable to explain to the authority and also to the media. So I'm really worried that suppose groundwater is contaminated, river is contaminated, what ultimately people get? One photograph of villagers, which shows the finger to the river pollution, and that will be few videos, and we get come that yes, we reported certain thing and they are doing awareness. But ultimately, if you look at the people who are using that river water for drinking, agriculture, and also the animal drinks, and I had not seen any bottle up till now came up which says that this bottle is for the animals. Human being got the bottles. Commodification of water has happened. I don't know under which law they're selling water. I am unable to locate, and even judiciary is not looking at this aspect. The major issue of the water in terms of the river, lakes, and there is a presumption and assumption which nobody has looked at. The pollution load which this water sources can bear. We have a parameter which we talked in terms of COD, chemical oxygen demand. We talk in terms of biological oxygen demand. We have lots of parameters. We never looked at other way around, whether those water sources, whether it's a river or even sea, is able to withhold those pollution load. We don't talk in terms of pollution load to this water sources. We don't talk even e-flow, environment flow in the river at all. When we look at the dams, just look at Narmada River. We absolutely have sea already came in like 70, 80 kilometers. And even the Dahej industry, which trying to use the perennial groundwater water from the riverbed, facing problem of the TDS. The Narmada bank used to have 300 TDS water. Now, because of the whole upstream dam, it practically has like 900 to 1,500. Even the water of the river TDS has gone like in terms of 1,000 TDS. So that's the unfortunate part, and nobody. And we looked at this as the dumping ground because we call it Mata. River is referred, and at least by the present government. And I had mentioned in my poem that we know how we treat women. So when you say Mata, we understand that, yeah, you are right. You are calling Mata in that sense. And you will find two major sources. One is the Suez, which we misunderstood that Suez is less pollutant because we don't look at today's Suez is quite different one. And I think Corona should give us idea and actually take a class with us to make us understand the other thing which Suez want to communicate to society. And the second one is the industrial effluent. And these are the two shores. Many rivers are alive because of these two sources. And these are the wetlands for many rivers, downstream rivers. And I many times refer industry and the people of cities are the wetland which pump their sewage and industrial water so that river flows. So if many rivers are in such a bad shape, and we don't get any legal direction based on that. I'll give you two examples. Many people are saluting us for two judgment, which I am very upset that people like us should be asked that why we are unable to implement those judgments and why we are unable to articulate those judgments on the ground. One is in the Supreme Court with about the groundwater and river pollution. It's PSS versus Union of India. It's at 22nd February 2017 order, writ petition civil 375 of 2012, and which is considered as landmark judgment. And I don't want to use, I request people don't say landmark judgment. And I request people don't talk too much about this judgment. In spite, this judgment has made people accountable. The Supreme Court has asked NGT to look after the implementation part of it, and NGT came out with the original application 593 of 2017 and also 673 of 2018, which talked about the river pollution across the country, and NGT combined made an order 22nd February 2021. In spite of that, there is no discussion happening that people who are staying at the bank of the river and those whose borewells are contaminated, absolutely they are getting practically nothing than the one photograph and one video in newspaper and on the Facebook or social media. And people are very upset because we even get depressed when we go to the same spot again and again, because they practically get nothing out of it. And I think this is one portion in terms of compensation, in terms of money, in terms of other source of water, which is absolutely ignored by the judiciary, and law doesn't talks about it. And to be very honest, National Green Tribunal has ignored this very prominently in many matters when we argue and we explain. One of the matters is Vishwamitri. When we argue the matter, the whole idea about when you talk in terms of restoration and rejuvenation, these are philosophical statements. Many times I feel that the preamble of Constitution, the way it looks like, and we know what exactly happening on the ground, many times, many judgment talks a lot of things in terms of philosophy, but in terms of ground reality, nothing is happening. That is one I want to say. In terms of treatment, which we are talking, in terms of treatment, if we're talking, this last point I want to address, and then I want to show two video very quickly. So when we talk in terms of treatment, what is happening? But nowadays we talk too much about protecting the river, and now NGT has come out and CPCB has mentioned 352 rivers, various particular stretches are critically polluted, and it's also part of our order. People say it's a great order, but I again want to request people don't use word great and landmark judgment, because on the ground nothing is happening in terms of compensation, in terms of restoration, in terms of rejuvenation, and in terms of understanding river in a holistically, which Mansi has repeatedly mentioned in her talk. And I think that's a crucial thing which we are ignoring. What we are trying to do, I'll just give you one example, what nonsense thing the expert has done. And I know when I use word called nonsense, I use even in a quote that what we had done. See, the COD is one of the crucial parameter which people looks at, that we should get the COD to 250 milligram per liter. And to do that, what we're doing, we are coming out with this so-called technology, which is ME, and also the spray dryer. We convert liquid form of pollutant into a powder form. And this powder, which comes out, the sludge which comes out, and we dump into the various landfill site, hazardous landfill site, and these are soluble as waste. And I'm really worried that we are shifting from pollution of the water source on the ground, which are visible, to the groundwater. And I'm really worried that this is what we achieved. And I'm very depressed many times. And to be very honest, in spite of many orders are in our favor, but to be very honest, that we fail to understand. We absolutely fail to understand how to look at river and water sources. And the last point, which I just want to bring to the notice, that it's also our failure that we should focus on activists. Now I'm addressing myself, that we absolutely fail to advocate in terms of environment planning. It's not part of us. We narrow down our issue. We talk project-based issue. We focus, like when we talk about riverfront, we focus on only riverfront. When we talk about Statue of Unity, we only focus about the Statue of Unity. When we focus on the water aerodrome, which is entering into the seaplane, we focus on that. But we are unable to address this thing in a holistic way, even in the code. And I think we need to go, to be very honest, if we review past only things, this pollution of the water sources become mainstream in terms of debate, in terms of coverage. People talk a lot, but if you're asking me, even I will give a negative marking to my group and myself also, that we absolutely fail to communicate legally. And there's no legal structure. I'm talking about legal structure in terms of internationally. I have not heard, I'm just trying to work out that we got in one matter fine of 30 crores in the export penalty, and we wanted to compensate the groundwater compensation to the borewells which got contaminated. It has been reported since 1998 onwards. The photographs were presented in the Supreme Court, and absolutely they are unable to articulate and work out a formula how to compensate in terms of money. Those people were forced to use that water in agriculture produce. The production has gone down, contamination of food has happened, animal drink the same water, but we are unable to work out a formula. Since last 3 years, Krishnakant, me and other people are sitting on it, and we are not able to get one formula from expert across country, including us, across the world, to work out a mechanism how to compensate that. Forget about remedial and restoration is a little bit far, but we are unable to do that. And let me show one video which talks about the groundwater, and I'm telling you, the groundwater COD has gone up in Gujarat. It's that model of Gujarat, which the affluent COD is allowed 250 milligram per liter. We have a groundwater ranging from 1,500 COD to 2,500 COD. Imagine, even we use those borewell villages, they will not be allowed to discharge because the COD is, suppose we consider that as an industry, the groundwater as an industry, which want to dump that water, it will not be allowed because it's 250 milligram per liter is the parameter. And the groundwater, Dudhwada village in Gujarat, from Baroda, 43 kilometer, Luna village, 20 kilometer in Baroda, there's groundwater ranging from 1,500 to 2,500 COD. So let me play one video, Mansi, if you can play that groundwater video.
Would you
and
like
then
the ground voices?
Yeah, not the
Ground voices.
The Ahmedabad one?
Not other one.
Okay, the ground voices, right?
Yeah, ground voice.
Please confirm when you see the video.
Yeah, just play. Both are same, but
Are you able to hear?
Mansi, the video cannot be seen as of now.
Okay.
I can see your file screen, but not.
Okay, so I am playing the video. Let me just redo it. Okay.
And then we can ignore because we can save the time. These are available on the social media. You can do it fast, fine. Otherwise.
Okay, I am doing it, but I think you guys are not able to see the screen.
That is what is happening with the state government and judiciary.
The screen is
Are you seeing it?
We can see your screen, but we can see your files.
Not the video.
Not the video screen, yeah.
Okay, because I am playing the video. Somehow it is just not working.
You share the entire
I will
screen.
share the link here. And then meanwhile, we can continue.
Share in the WhatsApp. If you share the link in the chat, I can play it from my end.
I will share the link in the chat box, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just sharing it to you. Yeah. Yes, it's to you now, Fauzia. Okay, let me just try one last time, the one which is hanging here. Are you seeing it?
The voice has come, but not the video.
Okay, so it is,
I think, share the screen.
I think it is the network which is not playing.
Mansi, okay. I can see the PDF file that you have sent. It's not the video file. It's not
the video file?
No.
Okay, let me just
if it's on YouTube, I can take it from there.
It is not on the YouTube. That is
it's
also
there, but I don't have the link. It's there, but I don't have the link. These are the video played number of time, I think. Sometimes
Okay,
I
so
feel
I am sharing you one more. I share you one more.
you're fine. I think we can.
Okay. I think I will try one more time once Shriraj is talking, and then in the background I will try to play, and then we can
I'll
try.
just see. I'll just take one opportunity video. One point about Vishwamitri River judgment. If you read, many people will feel that there's a definition of river into it. There's a talk about the restoration, regeneration. The whole river will be restored. But I think I'm not very sure whether Neha, Sarvat, and other people are there or not. But we know the ground reality. So many times don't go by the news coverage. Don't go by the articles or judgment. Talk to people who are on the ground to know the reality. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you, Rohit sir. And I think you bring a very important point, which we have been also talking for quite some time, both of us, that whether should we have water balance budget or how it should be. And you also raise a very pertinent point when you say that we are also not prepared to fight this up in the court, both from the activist side and from the judiciary side. Being in academics, I always wonder that are we really teaching in this country how the water system is and how their rights have to be fought. I mean, for that matter, in the bachelors of law, in the bachelors of all kinds of planning and development, water itself is in the back seat. Particularly in law, if I know a little bit how it is taught in both the professional bachelors and in regular LLB. Environment is just one, I think, very minor subject to study. And then the civil lawyers most of the time are fighting environmental cases. And then eventually it becomes an anthropocentric argument in the courts as well, as you rightly pointed, that we are yet far to discuss even the rights of the animals and other beings, So we are still fighting for human beings' rights, and that too we are not ready in the court. But I think we will just take Shriraj's point of view here, and then we will go further. Because Shriraj, you and me share a very common soft entity, which is the lakes and the ponds. And you have been also in the battleground of the judiciary. And you also heard what Rohit sir said, that there is one part of it that you may take pride in some things which are judicially fought, won or lost, but one part is that part that it is fought in the judiciary, and then there was somebody who was raising a voice, or somebody became a voice of the voiceless. But the another part of the story is what actually happens on the ground, even if the case is won or lost. These things, is the thing changing in the ground, or is it more a matter that the voice was brought to the court? Where do we stop as as architects and activists, for that matter, when we take a position that we would like to become voice of these voiceless creatures? So I know you have fought battles for lakes and ponds. So we would like to know your experience, and also what kind of questions you have to the society, to the experts. Now we also know that nobody is expert here. We all are fighting this battle. So over to you, Shriraj, and we look forward to hearing you. Yeah.
So good evening, everyone. Just to give a background of like the case and what I'm going to talk about. So I belong to a place called Kutch. Now everyone know Kutch as it has that white desert. How the government showcase to the whole world and all. At the same time, when we are talking about water, Kutch has one of the most intricate water management system from ages. We have villages like Tera. We have also, if we talk about Bhuj, which is a capital of Kutch from last 451 years, there is a water channel, because Kutch, the monsoon used to be such that, every 5 years there was a heavy monsoon. So the catchments and the water system has to be managed and designed in such a way that, the water stays and it is being used, for 5 years until we get another monsoon. So that was all the system. Then everyone wants development. So the local bodies and so recently we have a political vision which is all about development. Unfortunately, like we haven't priced water. If we would have priced water, then then the focus would have been water, but the prices are just about cement, concrete, bricks. So there was a lake development project which was in the city center of Bhuj, and the development vision or plan had totally ignored the lake. So this was also one of the key things which we actually presented in the court later on, that like the whole management thing, the whole plan of the lake development, there was no lake. There was just the concrete structures which were being suspended inside the water body, and which was actually reducing the area of the lake. And when the thing started moving on the ground, I was actually in the university. We had a discussion with Mansee ma'am. This thing is happening and all. So earlier, that lake was very close to the local citizen. It was a social place. It's called Himdhara Lake, and people used to sit, hang out in the evening. They used to have those, like they talk about. It was a community space, and when this started to happen, lot of people, I mean, most of them, uh, they thought that this is whatever is happening, it's not right. But at the same time, they had this notion, because it is done by a government or body, it has to be right. Okay, so when we started to talk to people, like what are your views on this development project which is happening, they said they all had the same thing, that like we from like deep inside our heart, we know this is whatever is happening, it's not right. But at the same time, it's government, then we can't say anything. So gradually, like we started uniting, because like Kutch has one of the uh, I would say, like, a lot of institutions are there, a lot of NGOs are there. They all work very independently. So like, we had to get everyone together on the board. We have to then we had this public movement, and then people started to realize that like we can actually speak, we can raise our voice against the government if something's happening is not right. So then we filed a petition in the High Court for this Himdhara Lake, and so far the judgment had been in our favor by the bench. And after uh, after the whole process, the people started to understand that like the whole mindset has been changed, that like now they understand that if something's wrong, they have a word to say. They have all the rights. And now Nagarpalika also, like before doing anything, now they are taking our like we help them, with different points how to do work. They take our advices, they consult us, because I believe not every time, the body, the government. So this is one case, like in which I personally felt that in this case, it wasn't the body who was wrong, it was the designers and consultant like us who propose such development plans, and the management, they are clueless. They are not educated, like professionally educated to handle this scale of building. So the actual issue, or I would say the problem, was through the consultants who gave such lake development plans, such ideas to the government bodies. For example, one of the biggest lake development model which everyone wants to follow everywhere, all the Nagarpalikas, is the Kakaria Lake. So they all want to actually replicate the same model here. So this was one part. Then there was this another lake which is a part of the same river channel, and from Hamisha the water goes to, there's this another lake called Praksa Lake, which is a shallow water lake. And there, because it's a shallow water lake, Hamisha Lake never used to overflow, because the water management wasn't clear, and the water wasn't enough to overflow. So the Praksa Lake used to be dried. It was never filled post earthquake. So people started to put the debris and all in there. And there, when we asked the government, so government proposed to construct a mutton market, and like a rain buster and all on that lake body, where half of the lake is already given to the police ground, which is under like Gujarat Police Force, and the half of the space was given to the this Nagarpalika to construct. Now, when we went to the government body to request them that this is a lake, we know that right now there is no water, but in future it is going to be filled with water. It's a shallow lake. It is for the cattle and all to use. Also at the same time for the people, for the migratory birds, because Bhuj is also known for the migratory birds, who move over here, and one of the most important reason for them is the lakes. So we went to them and they were very ignorant. They said on our face that you can do whatever you want to do, but we won't do. We are not stopping. We are moving forward. So we filed another PIL. We fought for that, and that was also like was in our favor so far. And as far as the last judgment of Himdhara Lake, bench has actually instructed Nagarpalika that they have to keep us in the loop for any management, and we are going to give the approval as an affidavit that whether the work uh, redone is actually they have done it properly or not. They have removed everything. So that, I believe, is a positive point of the judicial system, that they are trying to involve the local citizens, local bodies, local institutions in such sensitive cases. So that was kind of nutshell, like short.
Thank you. It was quite brief, and you raised very interesting points, Sriraj, and that where also I have spent nearly 2 decades of my life. The way he explained the lake, how it gets occupied eventually, we actually have lost more than half of the lakes in the country in the very systematic, lawfully done reclamation of the water bodies. So here you present a case, actually not the lake for the people, but you actually made points for the birds and the cattle and the water body to remain as water body. And before the session, we were talking about having the right bench, and you also nodded about the right bench to really hear these kind of things. So maybe you can open up the questions to both the speakers. I know we are running late, but it's very interesting conversation going on. Go ahead, Sriraj.
So one of my first question is to Rohit sir, because he's very active judicially. How important it is to actually present a case in such a manner that it goes through those norms of High Court. For example, if you just go and tell them that like whatever development is happening, it's not right, so they are not going to take it. So is there any thing you would like to say to represent your case?
Yeah, so basically there are two things which even I had learned. I'm not a lawyer. So basically I started practicing law because of a person like Girish Patel, who was our High Court known lawyer, and who initiated a number of PIL concepts. So one thing is very clear, that you should see that we don't draft in a routine manner the other petitions are drafted. That is one. Generally, we are advised, and we do cut and paste in terms of following the same system which there for the other matters. So basically, if you just look at the Vishwamitri matter, the NGT matter, we are not drafted in a manner in which generally people are putting on record those petitions. That is one. Second, we always try to bring in the philosophical aspect also into the petition. Like in Vishwamitri, we put on record definition of river, because we also wanted to contest on that aspect, because when we look at the river, we always talk in terms of narrow sense of the channel, and we don't look at the wetlands, ravines, meanders, and number of things as a river. So I think that is second. And third, which I will say that we need to, when we go to the court, we need to focus on one point at a time. Many times, on many matters, I'm asked when I come back that you are not report this point. So I say that I don't think that these are so simple thing to be addressed in 15 minutes or half an hour, 1 hour to cover all points. So even by arguing also, we make a point that I'm only focusing on this point at this stage. And second, the thing, the second point we have to keep in mind that we want to, when we put argument, I think the affidavit are also not should not be like a formal affidavit. I'm denying para 1 and we disagree and this and that. We should put on record what exactly we want to communicate in the affidavit. Our many affidavits, if you just look at the Vishwamitri one, many people told us these are not the legal affidavits. More on the facts, more on the philosophical aspect, more on the explaining ecology and environment as if that you are taking a class. So I'll say that don't mind. if you are taking a class to the court and humbly say that we use the term, I'm addressing myself, but we practically addressing to the court, but not to say that, we said that I'm addressing myself. This should be the criteria. So I think these are major points which we should keep in mind. And petition should not be drafted in a very narrow sense. And when you focus narrow point, explain that you are at this stage not referring other aspect. So that judgment should not come out in the fashion in which create problem for the other matters which are not referred in this particular case. So that is what.
Very interesting point, huh? So learn from the.
Yeah, because
but
for
probably
our
we are
case,
looking for a magic wand, huh? To leapfrog what Rohit sir
no, so
did.
for our case also, we actually
Go ahead.
we actually redrafted the same thing for like 10 times. We went to like different people to actually give us the approval whether we are drafting it in the right manner or not. Otherwise, no, like within the very first hearing, your case can be just like shelved. So it was really important to
Let me
know how
address
to actually
two
draft.
more judgment which about the lake which you refer. There is one 2000
Right,
into
right.
10621 of 2000. The matter in the High Court about the lake, and in which the order says, because people like us made an intervention, that even town planning scheme is not allowed to
That is
encroach
2001.
upon.
Right.
2001.
Yeah, so that is one. And second, the recent petition has been filed in Gujarat High Court to protect artificial and natural lake both.
Natural
and the matter
lake.
is notice has been issued, and I think
Right.
it's coming for the hearing.
Last week, just last week. It was just last week.
It's,
Yeah.
Right.
it's
Right.
filed by
Right.
Paryavaran
Right.
Mitra, Mahesh
Yeah, it
Pandya's
is by
group,
Mahesh
and
Bhai.
it is very
Mahesh
good
Bhai was
petition.
fighting it.
Mahesh Bhai, yeah, it's a good matter
Right.
which is filed in.
I think it should be used as a precedent in the country, because now when we are talking about designation and delineation of most of the water bodies. Yes, so Shriraj, you please continue. Yeah.
Yes, just one point, sir. There's a gazette by Gujarat government, and in that gazette they have mentioned all the lakes which has to be protected. Unfortunately, the whole gazette was confidential and kept in Sachivalaya. Somehow, for this second case, we got hold of the gazette. I believe I have shared the PDF with Mansee ma'am. I would
Yes.
like I can also share it with you, which is one of the like one of the very important, if you are working with the lakes and all, it helps a lot with the case, because the gazette government has only notified the lake, so it was a very important document for us to
Gazettes
consider.
has not reached offices, by the way. Let us
Ji,
know
ji,
that.
ji. My second
In
question is
Vishwavadri
to.
case, one of the lake is notified. Sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I would like to ask
No, I'm just
Mansee
making
ma'am.
that one of the lake.
Right,
Sorry, there is a time lapse. Sorry.
there is a time. So you can continue.
Yeah, so I'm just making point that one of the lake, which Bimnath Lake, which was considered as part of the riverfront project, it is notified lake, and I argued in the front of NGT and explained repeatedly that lake has been completely modified, and the huge building complex has been built up by the corporation themselves.
That lake was studied by one of the students from Teresa's last year, by the way. So I have the report from the student, interestingly. Okay, Shriraj, please continue. There's some, maybe someone has their mic on, maybe would like to. Go ahead, Shriraj, I have muted. Yeah, go ahead. You are not audible, Shriraj.
Okay, sorry, you muted all.
Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry.
Anyways, my second question is to Manshi ma'am, because ma'am, you have been working a lot with the citizens, in the rural areas of Himachal and all. Do you think that from past decade the things are changing, how people are seeing development, or like how much do you think that like we should also focus such topics and such subjects in the schools, where actually the children have started to learn what is sustainable development, we can talk about it. So do you think any such changes happening, or any hope, because like we are actually a bit depressed about whatever the current scenario is? So
Yeah, that's a very tough question. But yeah, let me just start by responding to the question that you asked to Rohit Bhai, and just wanted to add one
Right.
little thing there, that as far as very little experience that we've had with dealing with cases and with the judiciary in the NGT, we've seen, and I think this is quite common across in environmental cases, that which I mentioned earlier also, that if there is a, like, what I agree with Rohit Bhai, that the petition should be strong in terms of presenting the substantive and philosophical issues and the merits, of various kinds. But when it comes to the court always, I mean, procedural rights and procedural violations seem to be getting more, kind of response from the court than substantive cases or merits. Judges don't want to listen to the case on merits, or there's a likelihood of getting a better judgment or a better order if you are talking about a procedural violation. The minute you talk about substantive, in the case of environmental cases, it will be environment versus development, in which the bench will eventually choose development. And if it is environment versus the poor or the rural communities, it will choose the environment. Where it is going to say that, we have to save this forest or save this birds and save the species. And it is these people, the tribals or the rural people, or the, what you have seen in the Khorigaon case, where, there's a talk of removal of encroachments. I was just reading about the Himdhara lake. Actually, I'm also from Kutch. So I was just reading about the
Wow.
Himdhara, lake latest. I was reading one latest order about removal of encroachments. Now, what,
Right.
how does that order? So we need to also look into the, like I was saying earlier when I was speaking, that, the whole justice element, when it comes to choosing between the interests of the economy and ecology, then it will be the economy, and then ecology and the people who are most dependent on that ecology, then it will be separating them from that and making them enemies of the ecology. And so that is something, or the poorest people will have to pay the cost of it every time in both cases. So I think that is something that has been the experience so far in environmental cases, and that we need to really figure out how we are going to fight. Now, the question that you posed to me about, the mindset of the people, really, I think that the whole
Right.
question of rethinking about the idea of what we consider as development and what we consider as sustainability. And I think that is something that requires a mind change shift. And if people have to really mobilize and start questioning, then that mindset shift will initiate that mobilization. But the fact is that there's a bombardment from various fronts, and that is especially for the youth. This is, where there is a particular kind of pull towards towards a certain kind of development, towards a certain kind of trying to say that there is no other alternative to this particular economic growth model. That is something that has already been sold, that idea. And but I would also say that there's a lot of hope in terms of two things. One is that, a couple 2-3 years ago, I wrote this article, "Will the educated save the environment?" Because sometimes I tend to get a bit cynical and think that, it is really the people who are still connected with nature in some way, or still dependent on nature, and who may not necessarily be literate or may not have studied environment education, but are for them it is a question of survival and a question of identity, whether it's the Adivasis or the forest dependent people of the country, or the people living in the remote areas. They are really going to fight to save their identity, which is very connected with the ecology of the area. So that is one thing. But at the same time, not being cynical, I think over the past 1 or 2 years, especially during the lockdown, one has also seen that there are a lot of youth who are coming out to talk about that the environment needs to be a political agenda. Because it's not enough if youth are saying, we need to switch off the lights, or we need to, the kind of band-aid solutions or the feel-good solutions that are promoted in urban, amongst the urban youth, or through environment education, that कूड़ा plastic का कूड़ा डस्टबिन में फेंको वाला जो पूरा मैसेज है, that does not address the question of कि where is the plastic coming from, and where it is finally going, and who is going to, when it is burnt, who is going to take in the fumes, or where is the landfill located, etc. It doesn't address the justice related questions, the environmental justice questions. So I think that these political questions need to come in, and then the youth now who are part of, let's say, who have challenged the EIA notification, the new draft. There was a big youth campaign when the new draft came in. Have started saying that no, the environment issue is a political issue. It is not just an issue of fixing a technology or fixing changing from a normal bulb to an LED bulb. It is a deeper issue, and we need to address. And they're also picking up on that there's also what do you say? There's a question of imbalance of power. That is the current capitalist model of development, which needs to be challenged, and we cannot run after growth. I think these are things that the youth have begun saying. So I see that there is hope, and we'll have to constantly work at making environment a political issue amongst the youth. Without that, we don't have a way to go.
True. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Shriraj, do you have some queries, or we can open the floor to the people if they want to interact with you people? Yeah, what do you suggest?
I believe we should. I believe multiple questions were answered.
Yes.
Yeah.
So because we are also running a little bit late, but today we started 10 minutes late. So maybe we open the floor to people, and thank you all the speakers to raise some pertinent questions. I am holding my questions for all of you, but it is more a generic question, which I will try to pose towards the end. If people are having questions, they may actually take the chance now. Anybody would like to pose any questions or suggestions to the speakers here? Or I take the advantage to ask my questions, or maybe it's question to everybody. Maybe you need time to think about it, or I'll just start the question from my end. I have two simple questions normally, which I do. Rohit ji, where do you see NGT heading? Because earlier it was almost toothless. I don't know how many teeth it got in the recent makeshift. And do you think we have enough number of NGT courts, and are they doing really substantial work as they should be doing? I mean, I'm just curious. That's one question. And another question is to Manshi, but probably Rohitji, short and sweet answer. You may depress me further as you have been promising me. Go ahead, Rohitji. NGT, role of NGT, where do we see it going stronger or weaker, or where it is heading? Shouldn't we have it in every state?
As far as the NGT purpose was concerned, it required to every state. Even the judges were not there in between. It was under coma, and a person like me has argued Vishwamitri matter online. And I was unable to explain the huge map which the whole team of Baroda has prepared, and I was unable to show that map. And I was depressed while arguing because it was online. And I think the number is problem. And the second is expert which are sitting and chosen are also many political issue. And this is a political issue. Fortunately, people on the grounds are fighting, and that's why NGT is posed to a number of things. So I'll say that one thing, that NGT is passing some interim order, which look fine, because you get report in the newspaper where it's an interim order. The fine has been imposed, and somebody is asked to remain physically present in the court, and the NGT will fire. But when we convert into the final judgment, I think it's depressing. Even though I got almost many matters good judgment from the NGT, in spite of that, I'm looking at many judgment in NGT. Like on the implementation of the Supreme Court order, cases was in Union of India, I was expecting that NGT will use the framework which we provided to do the documentation across the country, how to implement the order. And we wanted a particular system to come out which has not come. The final order has said number of things fantastic, but the system which we wanted has not come out. So I think many more things, we need to review all orders. I think we should come out as a system, which we used to do in past in PIL, that we used to review the judgment. It's not content. When you critique the judgment, it's not content. I think that more needs to be done, and we should review at least last 3-4 years judgment, not just interim order, because many times interim orders are very good order looks like, and many times newspaper reporting which verbally happen in the court are reported, but ultimately doesn't get translated in terms of direction, in terms of system, in terms of certain guidelines. It doesn't get reflected in the final judgment. So I think that we need to do. But at last, I think just want to make a point which Manshi said. On the ground, if people are fantastic in terms of articulation, I learned a lot from them, and they are very good expert on the ground, those who are facing environmental issue. And I think they should be projected, and they will change the world, or they will be the main people who will able to do a lot than the people who are you are looking at us on the screen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. At least little lesser depressing than I was expecting, because NGT should be there in every state, I believe. I mean, even looking at the number of cases which can be fought. But I think a very inherent question which should come out of this kind of discussion is that, are we actually producing environmental law experts? Or is it that community out of the distress is going to the court? Do we have really people who can truly become the judiciary or judicial voice of these kind of things, you know? Because I and Shriraj are not trained to fight these kind of things. But then when I look at the course academics of the law, and I get into it and see what kind of environmental laws and how many environmental lawyers are produced in the country, then the answer looks very bleak. So I'm just curious that, does environment issue remains an issue of the people from the ground, and that to the vulnerable community, because end of the day they end up fighting in the court because it is matter of their rights. But then how far are we in this system where we will transcend this anthropocentric way of even looking at environment, because poor people are also, and vulnerable community and activists are also anthropocentric in the larger picture. And if I take example from New Zealand, where all the water bodies have been given status of being, we still have not given the status of being as a living being apart from Ganga to any other water body in the country. So I'm just curious that we are still fighting an anthropocentric battle. How far are we in actually reaching a kind of a judiciary where the judiciary actually talks about climate change, actually talks about other beings, actually talks about the holistic way of looking at environment? Manshi, I know it's too many questions to you, but because we are talking philosophy here, but we need to have some hope that beyond humans, there are other creatures living in this planet, and we have to become their voice. And let me also tell the participants here that the entire World Wetlands Day to World Water Day, we are going to talk in 6 weeks about birds, about amphibians, about aquatic flora and fauna, so that we also cover those things in the water discussions of Wednesdays for Water. Just a sideline announcement. So Manshi, give us some hope that we will go past humans and also start talking about others.
So yeah, I know the hope part is really, I mean, if you're asking activists for that, but that's the thing. I mean, we have to also keep the reason why we are able to go on is because, there's no choice but to be hopeful. And second is that we know that, for all the beings who don't have a space to speak, and this includes even human beings who are not considered to be, literate enough, not considered to be, having a voice. everybody, I think that, we need to kind of look at our privilege and then use that privilege to raise that voice. So we don't have a choice. We have to do it. And we have to be hopeful. Having said that, one more thing, I just wanted to plug in the chat box, this youth movement that is happening in Himachal, in the tribal areas, where they've started this no means no campaign, where they are saying no to further dams in their region. And it's very interesting because Shriraj had raised this question earlier to me, that what is the hope. So here are youth who were stuck in their homes, who were studying in Chandigarh, etc., from the tribal areas, who were studying in outside, and in the lockdown they were forced to go back home, and then they realized what a precarious situation their area is in, and they started taking action, and they've started this campaign early this year, and that is picking up a lot of momentum. So I appeal to all of you to please circulate this and sign it also. About the question that you asked, this, even the judgment that came for, I mean, the Supreme, the High Court judgment in case of Ganga and Yamuna rivers, if you look at the details, the fine text of the judgment, there are a lot of questions about the way it has been framed, because it relies on, number one, the rivers as sacred entities in Hindu mythology, but then it does not take into account the current, again, the political economy within which these rivers have been reduced to, the state that they are today, where, you have industrial pollution, you have dams, you have various things going on. And so it is, looking at protecting these rivers, and then they've been given legal persons, the status of legal persons, and the parents, the in loco parentes, who have been given the charge of protecting these rivers, are the same bodies, the government bodies, who are responsible for the lack of governance, who are responsible for the destruction of the rivers, who have failed to do their duty. So then that brings us to a question, is when the enforcement agencies are either not dysfunctional, or they are corrupt, or they don't have the will, and then they are put in charge of protecting the rivers as humans, then it raises question on the efficacy of the judgment, which is why the judgment has also been challenged now in the Supreme Court, or then when it was passed. So and there hasn't been any hearings on it, and of course it is very different from what happened in Colombia or New Zealand. I think that we can't go into details of that right now, but that constitutional basis is missing in the case of the judgment that we have for Ganga. So there is a need to look at this legal rights of rivers debate in the context of what is going on in our country. And then also I feel that, I'm of the view that there is a limited, I think Rohit Bhai also said it, there's a limited possibility from the judiciary. I think we cannot put all our eggs in one basket. We need to look at, if we are looking at, protecting our ecological systems and the, stakes of the people dependent on it, if we are looking at, protecting these, then we need to make it a political issue. And we need to look at the various ways in which people can come together to, one, resist the destruction of these ecological systems, and second is work towards revival, whether it's of a lake or a river or, whatever. I think that, and in both cases, it is the people or the citizens who will have to take the lead. Even the court would come under pressure if there is a larger political environment for the same, and that can be only created by citizens who are, aware and conscious. And so that mindset change plays a very important role. And I think that we will have to constantly work towards consciousness building, and we'll have to constantly work towards collectivizing, people to take action, to take responsibility, to bring our, agencies to account. Until we do that, it'll be, a few individuals who are fighting, and then you have the attack on environment defenders, which is happening across the world, and India is now getting, more known for it also. I mean, anti-dam activists getting killed, attacked, repressed, put in jails, etc., or all kinds of activists being repressed. And the more repression there is, the more lack of democratic space there is, then there will be lesser voice, there'll be lesser speaking up. So we need to also kind of address the issue of creating or expanding the democratic space, strengthening the democratic space. I think when we are able to strengthen the democratic space, only then will we be able to strengthen judiciary as a democratic pillar also. So that is all I would like to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I think you also laid the path for our next session, because you do mention that unless and until there is, this democratic space, or I will call it democratization of water, judiciary itself becomes weak to even come in favor of the water systems, or for that matter, environmental system per se. That brings me towards the end of this session today, and thank you all the speakers for the lovely conversation here. I want to inform all of you, as I mentioned earlier as well, that we will have the part 2 of this, with again looking at larger policy perspective, and then going to one case, so that we can make some kind of relationship how policies really happen on ground and what kind of changes come. But we have lot of session lined up in between, and therefore the part 2 is going to happen sometime in February, exactly I must say 2 months from now. That's the first slot we have now available. But what the Manshi gave us hope in terms of that we the people, and that's what also water governance is about. Everything boils down to how we want to really change the course of the environment, and therefore youth comes as the center stage, or I will say the torch bearers now. It is a little bit of selfishness to really put every responsibility on the youth, but because often we talk about environment and we end up talking about future generation, we have to also give them this power and hope that they have to also fight for these kind of issues. Importantly, in democracy, we have to talk about everybody, and youth has to lead it. But then grassroots levels have been quite active in doing a lot of these kind of activities. And in next 2 sessions, we are actually talking about grassroots innovations in water management, which will encompass not only democracy, which will talk about Swaraj, which will talk about how local people take charge of their systems and problems and also solve this. And I must also say with a lot of pride that we have Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi, Padma Bhushan, who is going to speak with us as a keynote speech end of the year, and take the part 1 of grassroots innovation. And part 2, grassroots innovation, is going to be taken up by Dr. Anil Gupta from IIM Ahmedabad and Srishti. He is Padma Shri, and he takes up 5th January. So next week, 29th of December, end of this year, we complete 8 months, and we will welcome Dr. Anil Prakash Joshi to tell us a little bit about Gram Swaraj, grassroots innovation, and therefore probably we will find some answers how people can take charge of their water systems and actually give us solutions, because urban areas have been a problematic situation, but we still have some hope. So half of the country can be still put in that hope category of water management. So I'd like to thank all the participants to make these sessions so healthy and also very interactive with all of you. And thanks again to all the speakers. Please take care of yourself and look forward to having you more on these sessions. Thank you all, and please take care. Thank you, presenters, for joining us today and enlightening us with your wisdom. Also, thank you all the participants for joining us and making the session interactive. Besides walking and talking water, worries and wisdoms collectively, we see this as a platform to cross-connect and expand our network and explore possible collaborations. We are also making notes to publish both scientific and non-scientific work. Here is a glimpse of some of our writings. You may reach us through email, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and also look at our website www.w4w.in. We look forward to your suggestions and comments to make the series more meaningful and engaging. And meanwhile, we hope that you appreciate today's session. We represent Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Hyderabad, Terry School of Advanced Studies, New Delhi, Environmental Design Consultants, Ahmedabad, FluxGen Sustainable Technologies, Bangalore, Counterview, and we are supported by Wiki's Water Resources Council. We truly appreciate your support and encouragement in conducting this series, and we hope that you will stay tuned with us through our social media platforms and our website, and you will write to us at our email IDs.